get going. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah,
David, you want to
welcome.
take us away?
Sure. So everybody, thank you who tuned in last week for Chris Wood. What an amazing show we had last week. Chris covered some incredible issues, and we urge you to go to our YouTube channel and watch Chris's interview from last week. It was really quite enlightening, especially for those of you who are aficionados of trout fishing. So here we are at Masters of the Fly, this week's installment, and just so you know, Masters of the Fly really has nothing to do with mastery. It has more to do with community, and we are always very our arms are always open to anybody who wants to join this community, whether you're an expert or an amateur. It really doesn't matter. I'd like to thank our planning board, um, for helping us so much. Clay, Tom, thank you very much. Everybody out there who's attending tonight, thank you for joining us on this warmer than usual evening in the beginning of November. And again, let me just remind everybody, if you get a black screen, feel free to go to our YouTube channel. And if you want to send questions to us, since you wouldn't be able to do it on the Zoom, feel free to email or text me or Lou, and we'll get those questions out. I want to thank Tail Magazine, Trout Limited, Done, United Women on the Fly. You guys rock, and you're really a big part of helping us do this. What I would like to do is I'm going to throw this to Lou in a minute, but our guest tonight, Jason Taylor. Wow, Jason, you never cease to amaze when I look at your Instagram page and see what you're tying. But Jason's really quite an innovative tyer. But not only is he innovative, any fly he ties, whether it's his design or another's, has his signature touch on it. He can take a fly, any common fly, and put his indelible mark on it, and that makes it his own. We're so pleased to have Jason tonight as our guest this week on Masters of the Fly. Right, Lou?
Yeah, we are. Thanks, David. Really appreciate it. And just a couple quick housekeeping things before we get started with Jason. Um, uh, First and most importantly, for those of you who've been following the sort of trials and tribulations of the striped bass management process with the Atlantic States Marine Fishery Council, we are in a very, very critical stage right now where the ASMFC is trying to finalize Amendment 7 of the striped bass management plan that will have an impact on our striped bass stocks for literally years and years, if not decades to come. The draft document, the draft Amendment 7, is now open for public review. Those of you who were on the American Saltwater Guides Association session at the beginning of our series this year know that the public comments made an enormous difference in the construction of the current draft Amendment 7. They are now asking for one more final set of comments before they finalize that document. Super important, every single one of you write to the ASMFC with your comments. Now, that said, the document is about 180 pages. And I spent about 2 or 3 hours this morning going through it. It's not for the faint of heart. So to cut through all of the craziness, we put a link in the chat for you with the Masters of the Fly draft of our letter, along with the dates, the addresses to send it to, all the details. So feel free to use that as a template for what you send. Hopefully we help to make it easier for all of you. The one thing that's really important is you need to make the letter your own. Apparently, according to the ASCA folks, I talked to Tony Friedrich this morning, the ASMFC actually disqualified about 200 of the public letters that came in response to the PID at the last go around because they were deemed to be form letters. So while this is super complicated, if you can just put a personal statement at the beginning of the letter and then use what we give you as a boilerplate, that should do the trick. And there's a great raffle if you get it in and under the wire. April 15th is the deadline. There's ASCA's doing a drawing, random raffle drawing, so some great prizes there. But please, this is incredibly important for all of us and for our fishery. So enough for the public service announcement.
One quick thing. I don't want to leave out our wonderful moderator who is not here this week, and we all miss him, Eric Schatzker. So, Eric, we miss you. Can't wait to have you back on March 20th with women leaders in fly fishing.
Thank you, David. Yep, very important. We're super excited for our March 20th session with women in leaders in fly fishing. It's going to be an amazing, amazing event. Eric will be back for that. I had incredible FOMO last week missing the Chris Wood session, so great to be back in the saddle here. Okay, with that, let's put Jason up on the screen. His at least the front view there. Great, Jason, welcome.
What's happening? How are you guys?
Good to see you, buddy. Listen, as David said, we're just thrilled to have you on the show. When we started to put together the agenda for this year's series, you were at the very, very top of our list, certainly of my list, from all of my drooling over your incredible Instagram, at FlyOnBy on Instagram. We did the session with Bob Popovics and Johnny King, and I know how closely you've worked with both of them and how close friends they are of yours. But really, we're so excited about how far you've taken many of the techniques that Bob talked about in his session with us. So we're thrilled to have you on board today. Maybe before we start tying, Jason, if you could just tell the audience just a word about yourself, your background, how you got into this crazy fly tying thing, and also maybe a little bit about your relationship with Bob Popovics as well.
Oh man, I mean, this is like, I'll try to make a long story very short and say, well, I grew up fishing Chesapeake Bay basically my entire childhood. Fast forward a lot of years, and I'm in Philadelphia without a lot of fishing opportunities, at least in my head, and I was booking a honeymoon to Belize, and fly fishing kept coming up as like something to do while you're there. So prior to the trip, I decided I was going to learn to fish, and I did. And it was kind of fun. Segue to, obviously, I got the bug pretty quick, and freshwater, smallmouth trout. Actually, the first year I was fly fishing, I caught a pretty large striper in a very tiny bit of water, and I was just done. I mean, it was 20 plus pound fish in 3 feet of water, and an unlikely spot. And I've been kind of chasing that ever since. But then I started tying maybe a couple of years after I started fishing, and again, kind of snowballed until I started looking for saltwater patterns. And, not that you shouldn't have a Clouser or a Lefties in your box, but there's nothing else really in the store. So I went on a forum called Stripers Online. And honestly, that's where I, internet met a lot of guys that I actually call friends today, Bob, of course, Johnny, David Nelson. It was at the time frame, I mean, I wish I could put a year on it. You will call it early 2012, something like that, 2013. Maybe it was after that. There was a group of like really creative guys, other than the names, I mean, there's guys that would like knock your socks off. Like they would like just put Instagram to shame if that it was a thing back then. But more importantly, there was kind of this community of sharing ideas and like fishing and techniques, and everybody was there to learn and share and have a good time. And that's what it was, which led me to like basically introducing myself to Bob in person. And he kind of took a shine to me. And, Bob's one of those guys that if you just listen, he teaches you a lot of things without trying to teach you anything. I probably learned more from Bob in that manner by the way he said things or stories he told than him actually giving me a lesson, for sure. I mean, for sure, he'll straighten you out if he doesn't agree with something. I think as everybody should, just honestly. But his encouragement and just talking to him has completely changed my life in the sense of like I would not be in front of you today. wasn't for Bob Popovics.
That's cool, Jason.
Oh, great.
And just before we get started with the tying, just out of curiosity, so Bob talked a lot about how, and I know that Lefty said this about Bob, that Bob saw fly tying as problem solving as much as anything else. Like, when you hear Bob, there was some specific thing he was trying to do with a fly, and that's what drove him to innovate. And I'm curious, you've taken sort of many of his principles a step further. What are the sorts of things that have been interesting and exciting to you in terms of the challenge of fly tying that you feel like you try to address in the flies you tie?
Well, it's always I think an outlet, number one. No matter if you tie 3 or 4 times a year, or if you tie every day, it's an outlet. So everybody wants their flies to look good. So I mean, I don't. If any fly tyer out there tells you he doesn't care what his flies looks like, he's just lying to you. So that's one, but not in a way that's like, not dressing a fly to just dress a fly, but dressing a fly that in a manner that makes sense for what you're trying to achieve, but also pays homage to like where it came from. I think is very important to me when I tie. So as far as Bob solved all the problems. I'll tell you right there. Even the ones he doesn't know he solved, he solved. And I've had problems, and Bob's intended purpose for a fly design was not because of my problem, but it solved my problem too because I applied it differently.
That's great.
Right? So, I mean, as far as like new innovative stuff, I really don't think there's anybody after Blaine that's the next step.
Yeah.
The techniques are all there. In fact, the techniques, most of them are very, very old. Most people just don't take the time to bother them. Don't bother to take the time to learn them. So when I tie fly, again, I think about what I want to achieve, whether it be sink rate or swim or profile or a combination of all the three, and then I have fun.
Awesome. So with that said, your goal is to tie 3 flies with us tonight. What are the flies that you're tying? And we'll get to obviously as many as we can in the time we have allotted. But tell us about the flies you're tying.
Well, so the fly everybody always asks about is a hollow fly, and I tell everyone before they tie a hollow fly, you learn how to tie a bucktail deceiver. That's step one. That being said, I'm going to tie a hollow fly. I'm going to tie it in its simplest form. Bob always told me that it takes 3 collars to make a profile, and we can get more into that later. But that theory, as applied to a hollow fly, because it's the simplest way you can do it, is 3 collars. Actually translates to like the majority of my tying that I do today. And so the fly after that, we can use bucktail, we can use Squimpish fibers, but basically is give or take 3 collars. I call it a cheater deceiver, but it's an idea I actually got from Stripers Online from a guy, no relation to me, named Chris Taylor, something this guy tied 15 years ago. And then that leads me to like my third fly, which is basically on the same form. And I call it a 4-feather fly because it's 4 feathers. You just have to know how to time it. Somebody said that's my buddy, Chris. Chris Taylor. The guy was the sickest tire on the planet, hands down. So yeah.
Awesome.
That's what we're gonna do. At least that's a goal to do.
Let's do it. So we're gonna turn off our cameras, David and myself, so that we highlight you, and then let's turn on the overhead view too.
Don't be afraid to like the question or point. I'm just gonna tie. It's not slow. But so first is a basic thread, and I'll keep them pretty open to start back to the top and back down. there may be things you pick up during this, you know, as we go. So we're gonna tie basically 3 collars. We're gonna have an end point somewhere in the middle it's gonna meet, and then something for a head. And we'll use probably a little bit more bucktail than I would normally use, because it is going to be, if I was making something 5 or 6 collars. Here's something that Bob showed me. I'm gonna do this here. Probably can see it better on the overhead. So Bob talked about this, but if you go in and kind of get your length that you need, and you probably can see it pretty well here, and you kind of just pull out the shorter stuff and just get it all out of your way. And this is a pretty soft bucktail. So I'm gonna find a happy place and just kind of pull out the bottom. That's a pretty long fly, so I'm probably gonna take some of the ends out. So I don't necessarily need that length, and I'll just do a little hand stack, which is really kind of a freshwater trout tires technique, but you gotta learn them all. And so that's gonna basically be the end length of my fly. You can see top here where my fingers are. And you're always gonna cut everything square before you introduce it.
Jason, there's a question as to what size hook you're using for this particular fly.
This is a 2-aught, like a shorter shank 2-aught. I probably don't. I mean, that you couldn't tie a hollow fly in a 1-aught hook, and I probably could tie this fly in a 1-aught hook, but I'm happier with the keel of a heavier hook.
Do you have a hook preference for this?
I mean, I could name like 6 different ones. So short, heavy shank. So I'm going to introduce this here. And, you know, if you get it just so the bobbin weight can hold it on there, you can kind of see it's just on top. So you can loosen the wrap, but I'm just going to take my hands and work it around. And as I go, and I'll show you another way to do this with the next collar. As I go, I'll just kind of make sure it's all the way around evenly. I'm not super concerned with these wraps in the back. You can always add a little crazy glue. And I'll talk a couple more pointers about hollows in general as we go, but I just want to see. So then I'm going to advance back up to where that kind of hair was tied in. And super important is that that last wrap is like nice and tight and crazy perpendicular. And for people that have problems with mono is like a leader. If you're like working with a super short leader, then you're gonna like probably break your leader. If you like get yourself some space, you can pull this fly all around the place, and you can add more pressure with a little longer thread and just shorten it back up. It's funny, I didn't check. I'm gonna run out of thread on this. Maybe not this fly, but we'll switch before the next one. So then I'm gonna push it back, and any big pin tube will do, but I don't want to move the thread. Get it back to the point where you can stroke it back with your hands, and just take a gentle wrap in front, right? And then to go in and try to get all the hairs back nice and tight. I mean, really as tight as you can get them. That focus. Lou, can you see that?
Yeah, that looks fine. We got it.
Great.
Looks great, Jason. Thank you.
It's kind of odd doing this without people in front of you real time.
Philip just said his screen went black, but I think it's unfortunate. Sorry about that, Philip, but I think, I don't know why that seems to be a Zoom issue. Occasionally it goes black. You may want to log back in, Philip. And Jason, for those who've never tied a hollow before, this dam that you're kind of tying there,
right.
You're not going back over the hairs here, right?
No. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go against it right like there. I'm not going to go over to the hair. right? So if I go over the hair, it's going to look like that. I don't want to do that. And you can see as I take wraps off, see it's going to open up.
Yeah. Lou, I
Right.
just want to mention to people, sorry, Jason, if anyone does go black, please go to our Facebook page. You'll be able to watch in real time.
So as you see, if I'm not trying to build it all up at once, I'll go away from it and back up to it, away from it, back up into it. And I'm going to try not to explain this slowly the next time. What you see is like the closer I get to it, the more the hair wants to close if you look really closely. And that's filled in there pretty well. And again, this is pretty soft bucktail. So then I'll just work my way back out. If I'm going to add glue anywhere, it's probably like in here, maybe just to the thread, and just take a couple wraps back. And then those dams don't slip. So you're going to need 3. You always have to think about where the next collar is going to end. So, if we're looking from the front, my next collar, I'm going to start in here somewhere, and I want it to end probably in there, right? And depending on your spacing, that hair may be longer or shorter, but as a general rule, it's shorter. This is pretty wide spaced, so it actually may be longer. But don't think about the length of the hair as much as think about like where the hair ends on the fly. And there's a couple like just errantly long ones. So the next collar, you can almost see it in the overview, right?
Yeah.
I want it to end about right there. Right. So I'm going to transfer that measurement, but I'm going to keep the butts in this one a little bit longer. We're going to start to build just a little density at the head. So don't look at it again. I'll look at where I want it to end. I'll move it this way this time and see that it's about ending about where my thread is. And these butts we're going to leave them. We're not going to tie them down. They're not going to go anywhere. So again, you can just take a couple loose wraps and loosen and tighten your thread, and the hair will kind of work its way around. And if you need your hand just to adjust. And then just take a look at it, make sure it's evenly distributed. Nice and tight. Again, that last wrap before you go in front, like super perpendicular. And you could have added some flash along the way here if you wanted to, but probably not necessary. So again, I didn't want to move the thread. I'm not worried if I catch a couple hairs in there. I want it all back as tight as I can get it. I'll shorten my thread so I have some control. So you see where that's open now?
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go up against it. And that's a bit of hair. So instead of just trying to build that dam all in one shot, I want to move away from it and then get back into it again.
And Jason, is that because it makes a more conical sort of dam and it's
Exactly.
Also, Jason, does that also keep the threads from collapsing forward and losing your dam there too?
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly. It's just not going to like anything on a 45-degree angle, it's going to want to come back down. If your angle is smaller, you'll have just ultimately more control. So I'll get a few more wraps in there.
I think when I first started tying these hollows out, it struck me how many wraps you actually have to make to get that dam right. Like it's not like a
right. And the thing to do when you're like making bigger ones, where you have like 5 or 6 or 7 collars, is use considerably less hair. I mean, I'll show you. I'll start the next collar with like how much hair I would tell you to use like on a bigger hollow, because the hair is going to build up. Here we've got 3 collars, so, and I'm probably like pretty good there. I mean, that's starting to resemble something.
Beautiful. Yeah.
You know, I may take like just another section of light wraps just with a little crazy glue just to be sure it doesn't move like that. And now we're like, we're at the end. So if I'm doing a regular, I'm almost going to put this on and take this off just to show you guys. If I'm doing a regular, like 5 or 6 or 7 collar hollow fly, I'm using that much hair.
Wow.
I mean, it's nothing, right?
Nothing.
What would you say that for the people who really focus on counting, like about 50?
I would never, ever, ever give you a number. I couldn't tell you.
Hey, Jason, we had a question from someone about what technique you use to prevent the bucktail from going around the shank completely when you don't want it to. Is it just using finger control there?
Yeah, you can just use finger control, and I'll show you the technique. Tell the person to stay tuned to like the next thing, and I'll show them.
Alan, stay tuned.
Yeah.
And you did mention the thread. Were you using mono thread here? I can't remember.
Yeah, I always use mono thread.
Okay.
That's something I got from Bob.
Yeah, he said the same thing on his session. That's right.
Yeah, unless I'm tying like true like trout flies. So that's as much. I mean, can you see how there's no hair there?
Yeah.
Right. And so most people that have having trouble building dams is because they have too much hair.
Mm.
So like if you just use this much hair and pull it back nice and tight, I'm going to show you. That's all the wraps you need.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then
radically
watch
fewer.
Like seconds.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Interesting.
So like anyone's having problems.
Sorry, Jason. With a smaller hank of fiber of hair there, I guess is it a little more critical that you get them more evenly distributed around the shank of the hook?
I think that's one of the most important parts of the fly is having it, all the way around. That's, if it's not, then it's kind of like I always describe it as like the staves in an umbrella were like uneven. The umbrella would just be like kind of crooked, and because that's like really what that shape is, like from a hollow fly, it's like umbrella, So here, so we're gonna put one more collar on this, and then we're gonna leave like we're gonna leave the butts in here. We're gonna pull it from the bottom of the bucktail. It's almost like a bulkhead, something that I think it's commonly referred to as like a reverse bulkhead. I thought I was like super cool the first time I did that, like years ago. I was like, man, I got something new. And then I like saw some Dave Scope flies from like 5 or 6 years before that, and I was like, oh no, I don't. So the next collar I'm going to try to end like right about there, right? But I'm going to leave this bulk in. I'm going to thin some of it out, but and you'll get like a nice. And that's not a rule, but I like for these little flies to look a little fuller.
Hey, Jason, while you're doing that, Morgan asked if you ever use UV resins to make the dam rather than thread wraps. Whether you ever use UV to make the dam rather than thread wraps.
No. I don't know. I probably could tie another fly in that amount of time.
Yeah, it probably adds a lot of time, right, if you do that.
And I don't think it makes the fly any more durable, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's bucktail. So see how the butts are here, and that pretty obviously. Yeah. That's going to give us some like just density in the front of the fly. And we rushed, and the proportions aren't that great here because, as far as the hook's concerned, I could easily sneak another one in there.
So to be clear
But I'll
on that one, in that tie, you left the butts longer, so it's going to get that section to flare out a little bit more.
well, no, it's not even about the section flaring out as much as it is I want density in the front of the
Density.
fly.
Okay, gotcha.
And I mean, that's a 3-collar hollow. I mean, for all intents and purposes, let's see.
There we go.
There you go. You know,
That's great.
so I'm going to show someone ask about keeping the hair on not moving. Right, I think that's a great little 3-collar fly.
Mm-hmm.
Someone asked about keeping the hair from not moving. Something I often like to do with like these little flies is like finish them with flat ties. And I can show you because I save room here, and so we'll show both of those things at one time. We'll actually show a bunch of things here at one time. So something I like to do is take and put a little belly on these flies. And it can be your bucktail deceiver too. But just a little short bit of hair that's shorter than the last tie-in. So if I was distributing this equally around, I would probably just cut it the length I wanted to. Because I want to manipulate it and have it be like kind of a particular shape and flare, I'm going to leave it long. And so I can pinch that to the center and have it really flare out and see it from the side. But that would easily move. So if you're tying like trout flies and you're tying in a wing, you might put a locking wrap underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And then cut the hair. And then what I always do in that scenario is take those locking wraps out and then close it off. We do the same thing on top. Maybe with just a little bit more hair than used on the bottom. This is actually a pretty cool trick. You take this and see the length you want it and give it a little slide in your fingers. And now you have multiple lengths of hair that you can just transfer. Same thing. Couple, hold it down. Locking wrap underneath. Manipulate it where you want it. And then get really tight. And then I may take another one underneath.
Hey, Jason, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What vise are you using, and does it matter what vise you use?
I mean, I love my Regal. It's the last vice that anybody will ever buy. I don't know. As long as you're tying flies, you're good. Everybody's got different needs, and if it holds a hook for you, you know, I'm super partial to this vice.
Well, tell us why, because you know, people use a whole myriad of vices, but you know, why do you like this one so much? It's
because it's like I open the jaws and I just put the hook in it.
excellent.
I mean, that's
Beautiful.
that's all.
Yeah.
So it's a really simple fly, you know, based on that 3-collar design. You can see we've got the shape, and it was perfectly round, but I added those last tie-ins just to kind of show that technique.
Mm-hmm.
Do
you soak your flies, Jason?
It's not soak. I I would typically take this fly and run it under, just run it under cold water and just let it dry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, guys, this is the same, the same three collars, just with, you know, the addition of ostrich in between and like a little bit of fleece in the head.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the same idea.
Very cool. That's beautiful.
Um,
Awesome.
so, I mean, I'll just keep going, and
Yep.
if there's questions that pop up, or even I'll fill stuff in the chat if you guys want. Like, is there any myriad? Like, I don't know what's going on in the chat here. Let's look.
Yeah, I'm monitoring here. I think we got. There's one question here from Joel. Could you explain? Actually, I was going to ask about this too. Could you explain the locking wrap idea one more time? So you're using a locking wrap, and then you're trimming, and then actually unlocking, and then tying it back.
Right. So the idea is like putting that wrap underneath just keeps it from moving.
Mm-hmm.
It's really all it is. You know, because then you have pressure kind of like from above and below, I guess is the best way to describe it. Again, I only learned it from watching guys tie trout flies and tying trout flies myself.
So after you trim it, do you unwrap all the way and then you wrap back over it, or you're?
I do, because I don't like the waist wraps.
Gotcha.
Just for space, you know, when you start tying like really small flies, and you're wasting wraps, then it just builds up, you know. So, and then it's just a matter of like, I'll show it one more time if it makes it easier. I mean, I have hair and hooks here.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting little trick. Anybody I've shown it to in person is like kind of light bulb for them, so that's why I like to add it. So you can easily just take a bunch of wraps, right, and hold it there and hold it there and hold it there. But sometimes you want to manipulate things just so they're like a really certain way. So if I want to really have that not move, and I go in with a couple wraps, so now it's not moving. If I take those couple unwraps off, see it wiggle all over the place?
Yeah.
Right? So I really want to squeeze it in place, and then we're back to the same place. It's not moving. And then like pull it up, and so you've like dramatically decreased your tie-in point when it comes to the head of a fly. So now, like, yeah, I could just go back and wrap over it, but like, what's 1-2 before I go 1-2? You know?
That's so cool.
Right? And you can tight. And I just broke the thread, which happens.
Glad it doesn't only happen to me.
Oh no, it happens to everybody. Everybody breaks thread. So I'm going to show another fly, and you know, you can use bucktail for this, and which is a way I could tie them both at the same time. But I'm going to show it with Squimpish fiber. Dave Flanagan. Is that Dave Flanagan from like Long Island? Dave Flanagan? Q&A. I'm waiting, Dave. I'm waiting for you to answer me.
Oh, I know. You know what? I don't know where Dave's from. I should. I'll Google it right now.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I knew it. There we go. What's up, bud?
So some of you can't see this because it's in the Q&A box rather than the chat. So this is Dave Flanagan saying a "What's up" to Jason.
There it is. Hi, Dave.
Yeah. That's a great thing about, you know, kind of the community of people and fly tying, fly fishing is, you know,
fly nerds.
Yeah, well, people ask me about fly fishing all the time. Like, it's something you can have like a very base set of skill to enjoy the sport, or you can be as nerdy or niche as you want, and then all the nerds in the niche kind of like love each other. So it's cool. All right, so the next fly, this is based on, and you'll see how you can do it with bucktail. So I'm just going to do it with Squimpish fibers, because a lot of people kind of like struggle for simple patterns to do with that stuff, because it's really versatile material. I mean, Johnny was talking about it when he did his thing. So basically, it's based on the same 3-color idea. But the first thing you have to do is you have to just give and you probably could just tie it in straight, but you have to give just a little support to the hair. I don't like that bucktail for this. And so anytime you would tie feathers or anything in the back of a fly, you would typically give it like a little support in the forward bucktail. So I do the same thing when I use synthetics off the back of a fly. It allows you to use way less synthetic and way less natural material too. So I'm just going to start this kind of flat and see, it's all about thread pressure. You should be able to get that to lay just don't crank it right away. Just get it to lay flat. Right? And then slowly start to increase your pressure until you feel like it's starting to flare and the hair's not moving, and then get tight, hold it where you want it. So this tie-in really just serves as support. No real other purpose for me. And then I'm just going to veil it with some Squimpish here. I did a little hand stack, which is really, I think, helpful in this fly, because it has some dense under fur here that you don't really need. I mean, it's useful at other times. And then it's got like a nice mid-length of hair, and then it's got some stuff that's really long. So I'm not going to waste them. I'm just going to have to put them back together. And the idea is that the hair is longer than the bucktail. We're going to tie it in just like we would like a regular clump of bucktail, but it's friendlier in that it's not going to flare because it's synthetic. And I will tell you, I use very little synthetics, but this one I like. So, and just make sure it is all the way around, and just work with your fingers, and so you feel like it is. It catch me sometimes not using like some CA, like some crazy glue or something, but on synthetics I always glue it. Fur doesn't bite as much. So, I really just want to establish the length and give that tail some support, so it's less likely to foul. And that's it. And then I'm going to pretty much move up to halfway. And then, so this is Blaine's filler flash, which is one of the coolest things in fly tying. It's so useful. And he used it to back feather changers, but it's awesome, just support material, and it has obviously flash in it. So it's killing birds with one stone. I usually like to kind of expose an end, and then get a couple wraps backwards before I go forwards and get it all down and out of the way. So, and this is again the thing that came from Chris Taylor, and this is before the advent of these bigger body chenilles. So I'm just going to palmer a chunk of this stuff in, depending on the profile I want. If I want a wider profile, it's kind of where you have to start thinking backwards before you tie the fly. If I want a wider profile, then I would tie a good bit in, and I'll show you how to get more in a small space, that you can do the same thing with feathers. But you know, it's about staying out of your own way. So that's a good start, and I'll tie it down, right? So instead of just cutting it, I want to get more, but I want it all in the same space. So I'll stroke all that stuff out of the way and tie backwards. It's probably super distracting. This other stuff underneath the vise. I'm sorry, guys.
No, we can see it. That's good.
I'm wrapping backwards, right?
So that's after you pop it. That's what's left of it there, and you're tying it back.
I'm tying it backwards. I could like take it, cut it, but I don't see why. And then you're like left this like nice little bump there, which is really gorgeous and useful. So this whole like, it's like full circle. So this whole like of having a support system is like a very old idea. If you go back to like, there's some guys in the Pacific Northwest that tie these really sparse marabou patterns that look huge and relatively, but they spit a little deer hair underneath before they wrap the marabou on top. And so the deer hair like creates like I said, stringers of an umbrella for the marabou. So this is going to serve as a support system for the rest of the synthetic, the rest of the fly. So I'm out of my way. So now I've got like, let's clean it up. Now I've got like a pretty big kind of chunky center of that fly. So just like we did in the 3-collar hollow, we think about where we want our next kind of layer to end, right? So we're not counting the bucktail as one part of the taper. We're counting the first layer of Squimpish fiber. So it's a second tie-in. This is a third tie-in. We're not counting as part of the taper. It's going to elevate the length, or elevate the taper rather. And now we have to be concerned with our length. So I probably want it to end like here, right? Just naturally. That's like the next step of the bait fish would be. You can follow my hand, right? There. So I pulled another color. So I'm going to grab more of the Squimpish fiber. You don't need a ton of it still. Just kind of clean out the back, the bottom. You don't need a ton of it still. Find the length you want and just hand stack it again.
And I think you said this before, Jason, but you use Squimpish for this, but you could use other synthetic fibers as long as you got the
You can use Bucktail for this or other synthetic. Like, so with Bucktail, instead of just, you can just tie in a nice chunk of Bucktail, right? And then, I say nice chunk, you can tie in a slightly heavier tail than usual, right? And then veil Bucktail over this will be the same thing. It's going to hold up Bucktail the same way it'll hold up synthetic.
Gotcha.
And so you can see when I lay it over top, like it's kind of forced from the front, you see it pop up, right? And from the top, you see it's going to lay over. So,
hey, Jason.
And again, I'm listening.
Quick question. The difference between Squimpish fiber and Bucktail, movement in the water. What have you, how do you approach that? How does that look to you? What's the difference?
They're just different. Nothing is like Bucktail. Nothing like nothing's like Ostrich. It's just different. It moves really well. I couldn't compare it to anything. It moves better than the other synthetic. But it's long, so it's kind of like, probably moves more like a hackle than it does Bucktail.
That's very interesting.
That's probably the best way I can like describe it. So I want to get I'm going to pull a little bit more than that, guys, than that. And that's the best part about this stuff. You can just add to it. And kind of do the same thing and just a little hand stack. Never really see where we're laying. So I'm just going to thin out the bottom. So this is also very cool. Probably going to stop it right about there. Yeah, I'm going to cut it square. And I'm going to distribute it around evenly. Take your time. Right? It's not going to look like it's anything there. It's going to look super, super sparse. Just make sure it's all the way around. Take a couple wraps. How's their front look? Can you see that it's all the way around? Right.
Yeah, we can see that. That's good. Yeah, maybe rotate that a little bit so folks see.
Yeah. So just take your time and get it all the way around. So, and the closer I wrap backwards again now, the closer I get, the more it's going to stand up because the more effect that center prop, if you will, or chenille in the center of the fly, the closer you get the hair to it, it's really evident if you use bucktail, but the closer that you get the hair to it, then the more effect that chunk of chenille in the middle is going to have. So the next part's probably only, and I won't say difficult, the only part of the fly that just takes some patience. And we're going to flip it over, start on the bottom. And this is a little shorter length of stuff. And this is where that kind of locking wrap's going to really come in key. So I'll just use this kind of as this to show because you can't see underneath my vise, and then I'll do the same thing. Like there, but use a little more hair than you typically normally would. And kind of just keep it on the belly. All right, I'll use a couple of locking wraps. And you could do this another time if you want after. Right, so this is going to stay on the bottom. And then we're going to do basically the same thing on the top to get, let's use a different color again.
So, Jason, I know this is stating the obvious, but just so I'm clear, so like the beauty of the hollow is you're creating kind of real symmetry and bulk and shape. With this, what you're doing here allows you to actually have darker color at the top, lighter color at the bottom, use different material. It's a different purpose in the bulk that you're building with the hollow concept.
It is, you know, and honestly, like, there's a lot of guys that like just need something easy and effective to tie as well, you know? So, I mean, and this is just that. I'm actually may put like another layer of hair here. I want to get this covered. So I'm just flatten that out so it meets the bottom. And we'll put a little bit more on top. This is kind of the beauty of tide flies is, as you can kind of decide what happens as you go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I encourage everyone to do is kind of like just figure out. And I would just go a little bit shorter. Just figure out. Do what makes sense. If it doesn't feel right, just take it off. And I just want to get some coverage. And
Hey, Jason, can I ask you another question about Squimpish fiber? And,
sure.
and Dave, you'll like this question. Do you have a preference to the Squimpish fiber that has some flash built into it versus not?
No, it's all good. I mean, you still have to use it where you want.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been using both, but I love the stuff with some flash weaved in for my stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. It's all good. So this fly is, I mean, in essence, done. And I think that's kind of like the point of this fly and its simplicity is to have something that you can like just have and fish pretty quickly. And have like a nice profile fly really fast.
Hey Jason, you have one question about the bobbin you're using.
Oh.
And what are your thoughts on bobbins?
So, by no way am I endorsed, and have to use whatever you want. And I have a variety of bobbins, but like, I love these CNF bobbins. I mean, you can see this one is like I mean, this was all black. I've like worn it off to the brass. That's how long I've had it. They're heavy, but they're super smooth. That's like a little guy. But if I'm spinning them, I like these, like super light. You just take a couple loops around to control the pressure. But I like my CNF bobbin.
Gotcha.
What
are your thoughts about eyes, Jason?
I like eyes. Do I think they really make a difference? Probably not. Do I like putting jungle clock eyes on my flies? I do. I like nice things. That's like, I think probably like any trout fisherman will tell you like detail is kind of like the bigger something gets, the less important like that detail is. It's more about like silhouette. So like, do I think eyes on smaller flies are probably more important than they are on big flies? Because smaller bait probably gets scrutinized. Trout do it, Abbies do it. But like, look at a popper for like, a popper's not like shaped like anything, right? It's just like it's getting a wanted response,
right.
By another trigger. So like maybe it's more important, to some fish. But I think ultimately it's more important to fishermen than it is to fish.
Yeah. So I know we're at 9:03. We would love to go for another fly of your game, but we totally understand if you've had.
Yeah, no, dude, I'll tie flies for hours.
All right.
Like, thank
so
you.
for anyone on, if you want to stay, we got some bonus but extra innings going here.
Hey Jason, if we're gonna go on to another fly, the fly that you introduced Lou and me to last week, the 4-feather, we've been tying with Squimpish and Bucktail, but I'm really fascinated to see the 4-feather.
Yeah, I'm stoked to show it to you. Like, so Oh, technical difficulties. I lost what I was going to show you as an example. Oh, here we go. So I guess I should show the fly. I mean, people have seen me tie this fly and they're like, it's witchcraft. But it's a super simple fly. It's cool and fun. You're not going to get many of them. I'll put it here so you can see. But so in the time that I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to like an ostrich feather. I'm going to stick it in some warm water, just off to the side here, and I'll kind of explain it. So when you look at an ostrich, this is like the tip. You know, everyone is different. Like, so if you look at ostrich and the overhead, this is like the tip section, right? Save those. A lot of people don't even use them. It's kind of like they're the weird part that's left on at the end. So I guess it makes sense. I kind of explain like the whole thing. So this fly came from like David Nelson and Bob kind of together. So Bob and I always talk about like how different lengths of ostriches move kind of more naturally instead of having something that's just a flag or all the same length, right? David used to throw a spay rod for stripers, and he used to tie like pseudo salmon flies, but he had to figure out a way to make them bigger. So this is shaped like a herring hackle, basically, you know, and the way it looks, or a blue ear pheasant. If you do like this, it's shaped like a pheasant feather or of any type, right? So if you're following me. So he was hackling these in the front of flies. He was literally hackling them in the front of flies and having them come back and making like giant salmon flies. I mean, from obviously they weren't giant salmon flies; they look like bait fish, but for stripers. But he's making big things, and that was the center of the fly, and it was all this like stupid. By stupid, I mean like excitingly sexy movement through the middle of the fly, and kind of kicked the tail, and they kind of undulated and did this thing. I mean, that's cool. So this is a fly that's tied in that manner. So that middle is all hackled, right? And then finished like a bucktail deceiver. Okay. It started like a bucktail deceiver, but you make it up the middle portion of the fly, which is more impressionistic than anything with that hackled. This is rare in that instance, right? So for me, those different lengths move great, and I love ostrich in the back of the fly. So in doing that, I wanted to hackle that ostrich as a tail. And so by soaking it in warm water, you can treat it like a hackle and palmer it. So I wanted to do it in the back of the fly because we get those things removed. So in that amount of time, this ostrich has been soaking. So look at it. So now everyone is different. Like in a cauliflower bucktail deceiver, you get the lengths get shorter as you go. So I want to progressively get the lengths of hair down the hook shorter as they go, the length of fibers. So in a few instances, ostrich is actually longer at the front, so you may have to hackle it the other way. What David did was tip tie them like you would a normal hackle to create volume. I want length and taper, right? He was making the taper in another manner, but I want this to be the basis of my taper. So I'm going to take this, which has been just soaked in warm water. Any tackle you tie it at a 90 degree. I don't care what you're tying, and then use the thread pressure. If you don't break the thread like I just did, use the thread pressure to like bend the stem down.
Why is that, Jason?
Because you'll see that the first turn of hackle almost like you're guaranteed to. They're guaranteed to go on straight, right? So I love that I've broken thread like twice, so people know that I'm like actually a normal person.
I know you did it just for us.
No, I didn't. I break thread all the time.
What diameter mono is that you use, by the way?
It just says fine.
Okay.
I think this is Danville, and I think there's a like ultra fine or something. That's like super thin. So what I'll do this time is I won't talk. I've explained it, and I just won't talk, and it won't happen again. So I'm up here, right? I'm like vertical to the hook shank, and hopefully the front view shows. Now that stem is coming in place. Get it tied down really well. And we're gonna go a little bit more. Just tie that really, really well. It's wet. It's weird. And we're gonna like probably go about to halfway. Hackle pliers are like super useful. I always have them on my bench for like if you break thread halfway through a fly, you can grab the thread that's still attached to the fly and like hold it in place till you restart thread. So the first couple turns of this, I want to get a little space in between. And this, so I want to just make sure that first one goes down nice and straight. This will start to make sense in like 2 seconds. So I want to take the first one a little wider than say, I don't want it touching turns. I want a little wider. And just like hackling anything, just like stay out of your own way. Try just to hold. That's it. Right. So I'm still pretty wide. So it's like 2 turns. I'm gonna try to get a couple turns that are like really close to each other. And when I pull all these out, you'll see like the beginnings of a shape already. Everybody's gonna go buy Ostrich just to cut the tips out of them.
That's cool.
So I think I'm done. So that was pretty straightforward, I think, right?
Yep.
I mean, not that people think about doing it, but it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I never thought about Palmered or Ostrich, I gotta be honest.
Right. So a couple reps in front. I'm just gonna tie it down nice. If I'm like really feeling fancy, I'll like split those, but just get it out of there. So now we're just gonna take. Let's see if we can just hang on that. And so the cool thing about this is, right? So one of these strands is left to move on its own. Does that make sense?
Say that again, Jason.
Each one of these strands, it's like you tied in individual strands of ostrich.
I see.
So each one is left to move on its own kind of recognizance, right?
Because it has its own place on the stem as you're palmering it forward.
Right. And because it's attached at a 90-degree angle, it doesn't want to foul. So that's the whole back of your fly, which weighs nothing. So the second thing you do is, just like we ran, that filler flash underneath the hair in the last fly. The support system here is going to be, I like Coq de Leon. You can use filler flash, you can use any other type of like stiff dry fly feather. Coq de Leon is super stiff and the fibers are really long. So I'm gonna tie in this different than I would like a dry fly hackle. I'm gonna tie it in more towards the tip. And again, see how I like put it at a 90-degree angle? Again, just get it tied in really, really good. Even like back to the point you tied in the ostrich. Okay. So now I'm gonna take what seems like an obsessive amount of turns with this. And this whole fly is just Palmered. And each palmer is like serves a different purpose.
Hey, Jason, you had a question from Ben Whaley, who obviously is a great tire in his own right. Nice to have you here, Ben. He's asking about the ostrich you're using. Are you looking to use a special type of ostrich? Think fine or thicker, wispier. I get you're using the tips, and does it matter?
Uh, I I don't think it matters, Ben. I favor wispy ostrich. Um, if I was doing, if I had like some stuff that was like fuller and it was longer, it probably wouldn't bother me because like it just fills in that space. He'll understand what I'm talking about. Kind of like, fluffier. I don't think it matters. I mean, when you take something like this and get it all in the same space. So I like wispy ostrich in general, but I don't think it matters.
Great explanation.
So see how that's like standing up there? Let's see if we can find colors that you can see really well. So that's going to support the Marabou. That's the support system for the Marabou. That's going to go on next. All Marabou is not created equal. Not every plume is correct for this fly. You got to find something that's got a thin stem, but also has like some taper. And when I find the one, I'm going to show you. That's the one. It's one of these order. So find something that's like long but has a thinner stem so you can get more on there. And then we'll like do two things. We're gonna pull back some here off the base. And we're gonna preen the top down, just dampen it. And square cut the tip. Right. Again, 90-degree angle. Just get it tied in. When you have that little tip hanging over the tip, over the thing there, pull it back, and I'll just lock it in even better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now you've got this nice stem. So you have something to hold on to when you palm in the Marabou. So a note about that Coq de Leon, if you wanted this fly to like float or hover, you could use like spun deer hair in the middle, like I was talking about before. When those fibers just get trapped on, just go with your scissors. It's Marabou, doesn't care. And just fold and dampen your fingers a little bit as you go. So this is what I like to do. I don't think this is completely necessary, but I'll show you what I like to do. I like to tie this fly down, tie this Marabou down before I get to the end. Like when I think I have like 2 more turns. And then again, let's look for a more logical color, but the brown will probably be better so you can actually see it. Again, this is Schlappen. Again, not all Schlappen is created equal. I'm going to clean off, I mean, literally the first spot you think you can like make a turn without it breaking, clean it off. And I'm going to tie it in with the Marabou and then move out of my way, get the stem tied down. And that pulpy end, you can just like clip out. So then what I want to do is find this happy place with the 2 of these feathers together. And I just want to make a turn together. So now we've gotten like our length and mobile rear with the ostrich. We've got the middle part of our taper with the Marabou for length, right? And now we're going to get some density in the front. So now while I'm tying this down, in the front, then I'm going to be super careful. And again, I don't think that's totally necessary, but I'm going to go and clip just the Marabou stem out. Take a couple wraps backwards. Let's see what we got here. And then I'll find this piece of Schlappen and I'll just continue with it. So now you get, if you're doing multiple colors, it's cool. You can get a transition of color. But more importantly, you get a transition of texture. And you kind of like made the first couple turns of Schlappen support the last couple turns of Marabou and had a better shape. And so that wasn't a super huge Schlappen feather. So this is going to be a 5 feather fly.
Wow, we only asked for a 4 feather. This is a bonus.
Yeah. But again, you just kind of adapt in the moment.
A number of us are commenting on the back channel at the quality of the Marabou that you have there. I mean, that stuff is just beautiful. I mean, how much time do you put into sourcing your materials? How secretive is that as part of the process? Do you buy everything in person or do you buy online? How do you get these incredible materials?
Uh, yeah, I buy everything in person. Look and I mean, a lot more people do it today, but like, if you sit down at your local fly shop and go through every tail they have, every bucktail they have, you know, you'll find a couple great ones.
Mm.
It's like one out of like 30 I look through is a pretty good ratio.
Wow.
I mean, that's like a great day. One out of 50 is probably more accurate. I mean, unless you have somebody cherry picking for you. So that's, I mean, that's the fly.
Beautiful. Gorgeous.
And I would rinse it out just like I do a normal, normal natural material fly. But you have like super mobile and dense. And again, like no matter how much I pull that down, that Coq de Leon makes that spring back up.
Mm-hmm.
And that really holds the shape of the fly. You got a little off kilter here.
Beautiful.
That's a gorgeous fly.
On the head there, so someone had asked about when we were talking about eyes, whether you think that sort of adding glue with eyes at the head and all that, if it kind of restricts. I mean, these flies are obviously optimized to just swim beautifully. I would assume if you add too much glue up at the head, it kind of restricts some of the motion that you want to get out of it.
Yeah, if I'm adding like non-jungle cock eyes to a fly, they're always tab eyes, like the ones you tie in.
Yeah.
And I feel like they don't really affect the fly in any matter. I mean, even like these are molded eyes in the back of this squid, and it doesn't swim as well as it would be if it was tab eyes. It's actually molded eyes over tab eyes. They look cool. They look better.
So that's a molded eye that's glued to the tab, and then you're tying the tab in?
Yeah, well, I tie the tab in first, but yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. But the fly is like, it just doesn't swim as well as it would without those eyes.
Yeah.
In that scenario. Again, until it's like super small eyes, I have very few. I could show you the 3 packages of maybe 4 packages of like molded eyes or stick-on eyes that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is tab eyes, and the other ones are like super tiny for like Abbie flies.
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm like covering
the majority of the fly. Glue of some sort anyway.
Right. So, I'm happy to tie something else. I'm happy to answer some questions. Like,
I think, Jason, I know a lot of folks are interested in the Semper Fly, but I think we may disappoint folks and hold that as bait for another session if you're willing to entertain us again. This has been such an unbelievable evening. I mean, just so much process here. I know the chat's just lit up, and I know I will be watching this again and again and again on our YouTube channel just to make sure I get it right. But, wow,
absolutely
unbelievable.
Hey, Lou, let's pop back on so we can join Jason before we sign off.
Yeah, that sounds good, and we'll also take any last questions here. So maybe let's go back on, and then. Jason, if you turn off your overhead cam there, then we'll get, or you can leave that on actually. Then we'll have all 4 of us there, I think. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah. Perfect. Here, is everybody still in there?
Yeah. Yes. We got you.
I'm going to look at the chat here. So if somebody's got something to say or ask a question, they can put it in.
There was
Alan
one,
asked
maybe
for
I'll feed you
simples.
one. There was one from Thomas about, when you were palmering the ostrich, I think he was asking, have you ever cut the ostrich off the stem and then tie them in that way? But it just seems so much more efficient to do it palmering the way you do it.
Well, I think it has, it has. I don't know that the purpose of that fly is really, this is nothing. And the case of like this fly, of course, I've cut it off the stem and uh and tied it in. You can even hollow tie ostrich. I mean, there may be a hollow tie in the middle of that of ostrich. I like, you know, I have some flies where the whole thing is stripped off and then palmered too, it's very cool. And Bob gave me a shout out during his talk about the palmered beasts. So I'll show one of those, and I'll again like it's techniques that I've learned that I've just applied to other manners, other purposes. So this is like a regular beast fly.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This wasn't designed to be a bunker. This was designed to be a cob mullet. If anybody's ever seen a mullet like this big before,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of a crazy sight. But this is mono, and the ostrich just palmered up the entire bit of mono. So I'm gonna look at the overhead camera, and I showed you guys this the other night.
Yeah.
But you can see like it's all palmered on, not tied in individual. It'll take me forever to tie all those in individually, but it takes like 5 minutes to palmer it up the mono. So it's basically just like tying a woolly bugger, where you put down a base, you palmer it, and you counter rib it. But then once it's all back.
And Jason, you're soaking that
water.
ostrich for 5 or 10 minutes before you palmer it that way?
Well, in this instance, I soak it and strip it off the stem, and then you don't have to soak it again to palmer it, because it's just it's off of the stem itself. No way I can do it without breaking one, but I will try. I've done enough of them that every once in a while I can do one without. Without pulling it apart completely. So this is without water.
Well, I get the idea. And when you soak it, it just kind of peels back like a banana peel.
Yeah.
Right?
So now that whole thing would be attached.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
cool.
That's a great technique.
Hope that answers that ostrich question. Let's see. But thanks everybody for like joining in. Hopefully there was like something people picked up. I don't know. I'm always good about answering questions if somebody sends me a message on Instagram. I may not see it right away, but I always respond.
Hey Jason,
that's what was always
just for everyone out there who wants to ask you a question, what's your Instagram handle?
It's fly on by. Like life just flies on by.
Okay. And we're gonna post that now in the chat. Fly on by.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great follow. It was one of the first things I followed when I started following fly tying on Instagram. So, hey, listen, Jason, we are so honored to have you on here tonight. This is an incredible session. I hope we'll save the chat for you because I know you were busy doing your thing, but lots of love in the chat. Lots of great questions. Just a
great.
tremendous session. And thank you for your generosity and for your incredible artistry here. And you're just an incredible teacher. I learned a ton. I know David did. All of us did. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
And,
Well, I
and
appreciate.
thank you so much, Jason. And before you go, I'm going to put one of these in the mail to you. And anyone else, who makes a request via email, we're happy to send you these Masters of the Fly bumper stickers, the very same one Jason Taylor will have very shortly. Also on March 20th, we have Women Leaders in Fly Fishing. On April 3rd, we have James Prosek. Should be incredibly fascinating. And our last installment for the year, for this year, for this coming season, May 1st, is a guides roundtable featuring 4 very influential guides who will be talking about fly fishing this year and what to expect in the salt.
Yeah. Thank you all. Jason, thank you so much again.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Jason, thank you.
Take care, everyone. Have a great evening.